Good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for spiritual advice for your everyday life. My name is Andy, and I work as operations manager here at the IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway, where we have a bustling and enthusiastic studio audience tonight for our last episode of IKYA Live before summer holidays. We're also super pleased to have all of you with us on YouTube Live. Tonight's episode is going to be a fun one and for me at least, a particularly interesting one, because we're going to look at a cross-section between spirituality, astrology, seasons. It's going to be really interesting, but IKYA Live is a news program unlike the ordinary, and it's really more a conversation and a discussion, so we are dependent on you and your comments, perspectives, and questions, so please write them in the chat below, and we will also take questions from the live studio audience here. Because, we don't just report the news here. IKYA, as a spiritual teacher and enlightened master, assists us in raising our consciousness and looking at what's happening in the world around us from a higher perspective. So that's really our goal tonight. And as part of that goal, we would love to have as many people join us live tonight as possible. So before we get started already now, down below, like tonight's episode and be sure to share it with family, friends, and fellow spiritual seekers. And be sure to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We are ikya.official. Now, to get started, it was the summer solstice just last night, I think. And to celebrate the summer solstice, we are talking about summertime tonight, and especially in particular the sun and the role that the sun as a celestial body plays in our spiritual growth and in the dynamics of life on Earth. As we all know, the sun is extremely central to life on this planet. So it is very natural that it would play a role in our spiritual growth process. But I am very excited to hear what IKYA has to say about it. So let's get started. IKYA, what is it about the sun, and why does it hold such a central place in spiritual growth?
Well, we need to understand that the sun is the original God, right? In all cultures, when humans developed, they discovered the sun. Once we have consciousness beyond just eating and sleeping, and we start noticing life around us, we will notice the sun. And then we'll start to notice how it affects us. It does things. That must be magical. That must be very powerful, right? And it affects us in many different ways. So it must be a very powerful being, right? So understand that your biology sees the sun as God, because all life forms on this planet has developed based on the sun, right? All climates are based on the sun, seasons based on the sun, and all life forms have been developing in kind of relationship with the sun and how the sun does its thing. So our biology is based on the sun. So that is God, biologically. Okay, so if we use that as a starting point, and just, it means also when humans developed, there had already been billions of years of evolution relating to the sun. So we feel this is a powerful being. And it is. And I often say that, in many ways, it would be smarter for humans to worship the sun instead of their gods, because at least the sun is real. It's there, right? Instead of all the things we make up. But all gods, when you look at human evolution, the most powerful god was always associated with the sun. In all cultures, they had different gods, but the sun gods and the gods who control the sun were always the most powerful. So it's kind of followed us. And remember also when we have monotheism, that was also based on the sun god. It's always been playing a part in religious and spiritual history. And again, it's there. It affects us physically. But what we will look at today is also how and why and how can we utilize this today, right? Without the belief systems, but understand that it does affect us in many different ways. And of course, what we notice the most, especially in summertime, is that we basically thaw. We become more alive. We have higher hormone levels. We get more flexible and soft and all of that. And that's noticeable, and that's a positive thing. And we'll look at the difference between summer and winter and how we can utilize that. Now, where we need to start is understanding that the sun is not like a planet. It's a process. It's a nuclear reaction that never stops, which means that the sun is never the same, right? From one moment to the next, it's all changed because every manifestation burns the moment it comes into existence, right? And then you have this enormous chain reaction to everything happening and it never stops. So it's just a process of manifestation and dissolving that manifestation, remanifesting. So it operates in that space where nothing is really manifested yet. It's what we often refer to as pre-manifestation. It exists, right? There is what we may call matter, but there is no thing. There are no manifestations. It's just this eternal process of recreation, remanifestation, transformation, all of that. So this is also what it represents. And also think in summer, we are kind of closer to the sun, which means what the sun represents become more powerful. So it's not just the hormones, it's not just the light, it's also what it represents vibrationally. Because if you think, we live in a world where everything is very solid, right? We have solid matter, our bodies are solid, everything is very solid. Even your patterns, and are solid. Your thoughts are solid, your beliefs are solid, your memories are solid. Everything we think of as abstract is still solid to us. Humans relate to everything being solid, and then it exists. We don't relate to everything as being energy or being flow or being information. We relate to something once it's frozen in form. And the sun is the opposite. Because there is no form, no manifestation. It's just this eternal process of nuclear explosion. So, think of when we move closer to the sun. Spiritually, what it means is that it's easier to dissolve things, right? It's easier to let things kind of burn up. It's easier to not be attached to manifestation. It's easier to reinvent. It's easier to transform. It's easier to let go of habits and patterns and everything that is solid. And in winter, it's the opposite, because then we move away from the sun. So everything becomes more crystallized, more solid. That's when we are in our kind of deepest patterns, where the brain believes that everything is just the way it is. So matter becomes more prominent in how we exist. And even our bodies become stiffer. Everything becomes stiffer, right? Harder, more permanent. And then in the summer, it's the opposite. So what you can feel in your own body even is that it's softer, right? You become more flexible. But it also happens psychologically. Emotionally, you become more flexible. You're careless about, little details. Often you can, well, that's fine. You go with the flow. You're a little less stuck, right? A little less square-minded. And that's how you can use it. So when we look at how we operate as humans, when we look at this cycle of we're basically melting, letting go, letting things burn up, and then we reinvent, and then we'll go into the fall, and things will then solidify, and then we have the whole winter where we're kind of attached to that. By the time summer comes, we're so relieved that we can just let go of things that we forget that we're supposed to do something with it. We focus on the absence of what is difficult, right? Summer holidays is like, yay, no work. And it's the opposite of what we should be doing. Because this process, when we're closer to the sun, carries enormous potential if we turn it into a spiritual practice. So, if you can then, understand that in the summer, our patterns are more flexible. Everything solid is more flexible. It means that it's easier for you to break habits. It's easier for you to free yourself from something in the past. Everything you feel is blocking you. It's easier in the summer to do something about. But then you have to do that type of work and not just relax. Because this is the interesting thing about humans. We're so used to being in a state of resistance. That's when we work, because we're working against something, that when that relaxes, we're so happy about that we do nothing. Right? It's like we try to set ourselves free from prison, but we don't have any plan on what to do after. Right? We look at, I need to get past this thing. Well, and then what? I don't know. And then we're so happy that we just stop. Which means you are not creating the alternative to the pattern you just broke. And if your brain is not presented with an alternative, it has no choice but reigniting the pattern you were just in, because that's what it knows what to do. The brain cannot operate and you say, don't do that. That's not an instruction. You need to establish new patterns, new habits. And this is, for humans, always, people talk, with me about this all the time because it's so difficult for humans for some reason. And again, also understand that the potential in the summer means that you can push yourself more, right? Because you can. Everything is softer, there is less resistance, right? And often what we try to achieve in our process is results. We want to push our boundaries and limits and want to go somewhere. And when you actually have the opportunity, you sit down and do nothing. And then, when things become more solid again, you complain. So, what we need to understand as well is how far away from the current position you need to move in order for something new to happen. It's just the same as if you're outside the prison walls and you have no plan on where to go. Well, that's where your bed is. And it's just, I often give a couple of examples. For instance, when you're with a group of people, right? Let's say that we're with a group of people in the park, at the beach or something. How far away do you need to walk until you're not with them anymore? You understand? Psychologically, you can feel, I'm with this group, I'm with my family, we're in the park, whatever. And you're walking away from them. And you're still with them. But at some point, you're not. You understand? That's the breaking point. And it's normally like further away than you think. Because you associate being there with those people, and all of a sudden you walked so far that you're not with them anymore. And how you define that line and where you define it is up to you. It's the same thing, for instance, when you leave home. How far do you need to walk until you're not home anymore? Because it's not right outside your house or apartment. You have to move further. For some people, it's down the street, right? But at some point, you're not home anymore. And in your brain, as long as you stay within the limits It doesn't matter what you change. It will still be associated with your patterns, because that's what your identity is. Because this is basically identity and understanding of your space. So often what people are unsuccessful at is when they try to change things in themselves, when they try to grow, when they want to, really reinvent themselves. They don't, because they don't move far enough. They think that like one step is enough. It's not. You need to move past that breaking point so the brain doesn't understand, oh, we're in a new space now. So change and growth always happens, in the old way, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's the simple way of understanding it. So if you make 1 step, it will still be 1 step back. There will always be 1 step back. So you will end up in the same place. And you will complain because I moved, right? I took this step and I did stuff. But it wasn't far enough, because there is always that 1 step back. That movement pulling you back to what you know. So you always need that extra step. You always need to move farther than you think you need to. You always need to change more than you think you need to. And this is why most people are unsuccessful in establishing change in their lives. They're basically just modifying. And this is the great thing about summer and being closer to the sun. Everything becomes softer. Everything becomes more pliable. So you can move more easily in your own space. This is also why you feel lighter. It's not just the hormones. It's the vibration that all structure in your existence will be more flexible. And then your instinct is to do nothing. So use that softness to push your boundaries more, because you can push your boundaries more in the summer than you can in the winter. And it's smart to utilize this, but look at our culture. The closer we are to the sun, the less we do. Right? It's self-sabotage. It doesn't mean that we have necessarily to be physically active, but spiritually we should be active. Because in the winter, we think, then we can work on ourselves. No, we can't. That's when we experience our structures and limitations and boundaries and blockages the most. So then we should study them, right? We should really study where we are, study how we function, study our blockages and whatnot. And then in summer, we can then change. But we always need to change more than we think. Again, as I said, this is the big mistake people do. They make small changes, and then it's not enough to break a pattern or a habit or identity, so nothing happens. So learn in the summer to truly push yourselves. But that takes hormones. Isn't that interesting? Because willpower takes hormones. And you've got it in the summer. But you're not utilizing it. So we need to learn how to channel our body chemistry into something that can produce enormous spiritual growth. Because in winter, when you have the attitude, I want to work on myself, if you then had a softer kind of life structure and you could change more, you would. But then you don't even have the hormones. Right? So we got it all wrong in our culture. We need to learn to channel the hormones and the willpower and all of that so we can create more change and reinvention. Yes?
Yes, we had a question in the audience already.
Yes, I really am fascinated with astrology and what you're talking about with the self-sabotage. And the astrology mainstream has this challenge of defining, and I have talked to you because this puzzled me for years, but this breaking point of establishing a new consciousness is also about how in astrology how we define, and we do that. That's why we turn into laziness, because I know who I am, and now it's the summertime, so I can relax and enjoy myself. So this breaking point and pulling in with the gravity of the solar system, taking advantage of being closer to the sun in the summer, the North Pole and all that. I think this is a really interesting topic, and where we get confused with the identity.
Yes. Like one thing that's really interesting also when we look at, astrology and all of that, because the gravitational pull towards the sun is stronger, we get the feeling that everything is happening by itself, so we can relax, right? This is why we have more hormones, but we feel, well, this is just going well. I don't have to do anything. So we relax. So we become more of a passenger, and we just want to enjoy ourselves because everything is easier. But instead of then utilizing the fact that everything is easier, we become passive, and we just want to bask in it, right? Because we are pulled in the direction of letting go, old things burning, all of that. So we feel, I'm free, right? Because it's happening by itself. But because we're not changing, we are not moving. And therefore, we will be remanifesting in the fall. Because we are not presented to ourselves the change, the alternative to what just let go. So humans are terrible at utilizing this part of the year.
Also within the star sign that we define ourselves by, we do the same thing all again, because we get some kind of satisfaction when we live up to our expectations. So kind of broadening that into astrology as consciousness more than defining a permanent structure. Isn't that in line with spiritual growth?
Exactly. It's always looking at the potential, looking at like, where are we now? How can we move? How can we transform and change? Because yes, I agree, astrology, established astrology has a tendency to be very fatalistic. Instead of looking at the opposite, the fatalism and the correct kind of description is there if you don't change, if you don't utilize anything. And often what people do when they get a description of themselves, they try to live up to it. Job well done. Instead of saying, well, the point is to move away as far as possible, because this is a description of where we are now. And then also learning how to work with the summer. And again, understand that to your body, the sun is God. So it means that you're closer to God in summer. Your body is more susceptible to spiritual work in the summer, because your cells relate to the sun, right? That's why you open up. So your chakras are more open in the summer. You have more sexual flow in the summer. That's not just because of hormones, but because you open yourself up to the co-creation. You let spirit flow through you. And that's biologically associated with the rays of the sun, but it also opens you up to the spiritual flow, because throughout human evolution, the sun has represented both, right? So we're kind of missing out on such a great opportunity to truly plow our way through our own bullshit, to truly burn up everything we don't need, to be in that holy communion with the sun, and work with our biology to also restore health. Remember that the sun affects us biologically, right? The sun can also help us restore health. We see when people have too little sunlight, they get sick. What I find kind of funny is due to our very strange civilization and the level of disconnect, we now all get skin cancer if we're in the sun too much. That's a new thing. Throughout human evolution, that did not exist. It's because of our own resistance, our own laziness. And now we can't get too much sun, right? Because we just want to stay in our own comfort. And so look at that. It's part of the modern culture that we don't want to change. We just want to stay inside with a blanket and just like be ourselves. We don't have to change. So the sun also triggers evolution. It's supposed to trigger growth. It's supposed to trigger potential. Think of what happens when you have a seed and you plant it and it's in the sunlight. It triggers life. So it means that in the summer, your potentials will be triggered. But now we have created a culture where that will give you cancer because we simply don't want to. We just want to consume and self-medicate instead.
Yes, we have a question online about, could you mention a few of the specific hormones you might be referring to?
No, because it's beyond the point. All hormones in your body, your whole biology is stimulated by the sun. So it's not just like one or two, it's your entire chemistry. All your like organs, like your brain, everything is affected by sunlight because your every cell has developed throughout evolution based on its relationship to the sun.
A follow-up from online, though, is that in the northern hemisphere here, especially like in Norway and basically above the polar circle or around there, we have the extreme of the lots of sun during the summertime, but no sun or very little sun during the wintertime. And at least the person who asked the question has the experience that the human body is not well adapted to having especially less sunshine, maybe in the winter, but also a lot of sunshine and now in the summer and not sleeping as much. And so it seems a little strange that humans ended up living in these areas. How did we end up doing that?
Well, they lost their way, didn't they? It also happens out of desperation. When you see human migration way back then, it was often when people were pushed away, as there were more people. When you have very few people and they're spread out, there's all peace because there's enough for everyone. And when you have more people and they haven't discovered how to grow things yet, they will start attacking each other and go to war over food and resources. And then they will push other tribes and push people further away. And that's how really it's happened. And then you have to go like further and further north in this case. But humans have not really adapted to living north yet. It's too early. Evolution is very slow. So it's not healthy for anyone to live up here. But it is interesting, the intensity of light and the intensity of darkness, which makes this cycle even more interesting when we learn how to utilize it. Any more questions?
Yes, we've got some questions in the audience.
Yes, this is actually, I work with health and nutrition, and with all my courses, I usually have a small part with basic nutrition. And this is one of the things that I always talk about. I always teach about the importance of the sun and how we in the future will understand how much it actually affects our physical body with the chemistry in the body on all levels, because I have also experienced it in myself growing up in a place where it's a lot of sunshine, being out and being really flexible and having a lot of vitality, and then living in Scandinavia and being like, I don't know.
A dried up bitch.
Like a comparison, yes.
Yeah.
But and I'm also so fascinated by people not understanding how important it is. It's like how can they not be conscious about? No, just take vitamin D pills. I mean, like, try to get some form of light instead, and of course you should take supplements if that works for you and everything like that. Yes, but it's almost like that's not an issue, and we should just take like supplements and do a lot of other stuff when it's kind of easy, and we should instead prioritize how can we actually utilize the sun more.
But you know, this is the same as humans do in all areas. For instance, when it comes to food, instead of eating food, they make up fake food, right? Highly processed foods, all of that. Eat that instead. So we make up our own food, thank you very much, based on how we feel. I want food based on my feelings. So then we make that. It's not food, but, you know, and it's the same thing. The thing is, the victory that humans have sought over nature, that it's always been in us because humans have experienced the forces of nature. And that's always been the goal. It's been the ultimate power. You know, the most powerful medicine, women or men, would be the ones who could command, you know, nature. So figuring out how to do that, and also science started through trying to understand nature and the forces of nature. So that's always been there. So when we want to live in a civilization that is kind of man-made, we need to demonstrate to ourselves that we have conquered nature. So this is also why we're destroying the planet, why we're eating fake food, why we think we don't need nature, why we think that the whole ecosystem is nice to look at, but we don't need it. Because it's the ultimate victory that humans have sought for several 100,000 years. So it's in humans, you know, and it's in the human DNA at this point to try to conquer nature. So when we eat fake food, we feel modern and free and strong because we've made it up. And look at me not being dependent on nature. So it's that, right? Most of our patterns and behaviors are ingrained in, you know, our genes, and we can't help ourselves. But spiritually, we should be able to help ourselves. That's why we try to study ourselves in life and to wake up, because we don't have to be a biological robot. We can actually wake up. But that also means learning how to work with nature and work with nature within and say, well, okay, there are things that can help us. In this case, the sun and the summer, and how it can actually trigger an enormous growth if we learn how to use it correctly.
Yeah, I had a follow-up when you talked about the skin cancer thing. Again, since I work with health and nutrition, I find it also very fascinating because I also have beauty food course with nutrition on the outside, how you can feed your body from the outside as well. And there are so many things we can utilize that really boosts our body to utilize the sun's rays even more, to really maximize that potential, and at the same time protect our body and cells from the harmful rays and making sure it doesn't happen too much. So there's so many things that we can do with nutrition, both inside and outside for that. And instead people are like, no, we should wear a lot of heavy sunblock and chemicals and stuff to protect ourselves from it. And I also find that very, it's the same principle. It's moving away from nature and harnessing that potential. Instead, you can actually, of course, you should block. I mean, if you're really pale and there's a lot, but there are so many ways to do it in a healthy way as well, and also see, okay, how can I work with the sun to potentialize the body?
Yes.
And then you have to have the plan, of course.
Yes. But absolutely, and it's our tolerance towards anything of a natural origin has decreased, and it's kind of funny, right? But part of spiritual awakening is rediscovering nature within, because that's also how we find balance, right? So working with the sun and being in the sun is important. Now, so it affects every possible function in your body. And think of also, for instance, how light can cure depression. Call it seasonal depression, which is basically sun deprivation. And for many people, emotional issues, if you stay in the sun, they will melt away, right? Your brain chemistry will change. So a lot of these different imbalances people have can be balanced by sunlight alone. But we also need to work with sunlight and also, again, utilize the closeness and understand in the summer we can basically, do our spiritual practices and they will work much better. So it is important to be in the sun and let the sun kind of shine through you and accept and absorb light in all cells. And you can just use a simple visualization where you try to breathe in the sunlight, where you try to activate your cells, and where you can try to see that the sunlight is reaching every cell, every organ, every function, that you can see that the sunlight is nurturing you in a different way, that it stimulates everything, and that it can assist you in balancing yourself, that you will have increased levels of happiness, right? The thing is, when we are attached to things, it's from fear, right? When everything is working, you're less attached, right? Because then it's easy to be generous. When you feel that I have nothing and I'm about to die, you will be less generous, will be more self-centered. It's also why when you see in the winter where people get more depressed, everything crystallizes, then it's difficult to be in the flow. It's difficult to be more generous and open, and we have more emotional issues. But in the summer, you can let go of that. You can let it melt. But then it's also a matter of practicing. Like, who do you want to be instead? Because this is how you can move past that membrane that we talked about. You have to make at least 2 steps, not 1. And you need to imagine, what does that look like? How can I take 1 more step than I think is necessary? How can I open myself up to real growth? Because it means reaching into a part of life that you don't know. Reaching into a part of yourself that you haven't discovered yet. Reaching into potential that you have no awareness of, right? Because you're leaving your neighborhood. But that's where growth is. It's not within the framework of what is already established identity, right? So how can we practice pushing our boundaries? Mm-hmm.
Yes, we need to take some online. We've got a lot going on here. But directly related to this question is, what if one has skin cancer and depression and is not allowed to go into the sun? How does this go together, and what does this mean spiritually?
Well, first, you may see that those 2 things are connected. As we have explained, the sun as a presence and what it represents is the transformation, the reinvention, facing oneself, and the divine journey, and then resisting it. because cancer is also when something becomes harmful. So that also represents our resistance to it. And often, as we know, when life is showing us a potential, often we freeze up and we have a lot of potential because this is not something we identify with yet. Right? So skin cancer is then very much connected to the direct interaction with the sun. So we need to see this not just as, the different rays from the sun, but also the sun as a presence vibrationally and what it means in your process. So you can still meditate on the sun. The gravitational pull is still there. It's not like the summer is not there because you have skin cancer. You can still work with the sun as a presence. Still utilize those potentials, right? If you can't be in the sun, vibrationally it's still there. You will not get cancer from the vibration of the sun. So you can still be active in all other aspects of how we relate to the spiritual potential of summer, and try to do that even more, right? Because it's so important for us, for all of us, to move past our own resistance, right? And it is so important that you all understand that the summer is the best time of year to try to move past absolutely everything you feel may be stopping you or blocking you in any way.
Okay, we're back to the audience.
Yes, so I'm coming back to the food and nutrition aspect, because I think the most obvious way to take up sunlight is just by going into the sun, like physically. But I think we can also take up sunlight by the food we eat. So can you speak a little bit about how food can actually contain sunlight, and how can we actually use that, and maybe even use that for our spiritual development?
Well, this is very simple. One knows this is established that, for instance, fruit that has been ripened in the sun on the tree affects the body chemistry a whole different way than fruits that have been, for instance, artificially ripened. They're not the same at all. Artificially ripened fruit are mostly harmful, and they contain kind of more harmful sugars, while sun-ripened fruits are much better for the body and will not cause the same imbalances. And it contains a lot more nutritions. So plants, food plants that have been in the sun for real, they are a lot healthier. There's absolutely no debate around that. Back to how our food industry has always been about how can we work independently of nature instead of with nature, right? It is in the human mindset. And once you understand that this has been the goal for humans since the very beginning, when you begin to see it, you can see it everywhere. It's always how can we do this without nature? Because it's, in a way, completely insane, right? That we try to make food and grow food without nature. And it's awful. It looks like food. It can say nutrients based on fertilizers and pesticides, whatnot, but it's not the same. But we made it up, we created it ourselves, so there. Because the point is to demonstrate that we can live without nature, not to provide the best foods, which means that we would have to learn to work with nature instead. And humans are simply not that humble yet. So this way of thinking, as I said, is why humans have destroyed the planet, or they haven't destroyed it, but they're doing their best. And we need to learn how to work with nature instead. So, with all foods, try to buy foods that have been produced by people who work with nature. It's that simple. it's better for you. It will provide health because food offers healing. Now most foods offer illness. And it's because they've been made outside nature or with very little co-creation with nature. Everything humans do today are harmful. And I said the only way humans will stop destroying the planet is when they destroy themselves. We're that self-centered. So I'm all for everything humans are doing to themselves, as it will accelerate the inevitable, that humans will have to rediscover nature and balance and physics and their respect for life and begin to collaborate with life instead of trying to conquer it and control it. But in our spiritual journey, we should be more advanced, right? We should already understand this and try to work with nature, work with life in our own process. But yet, utilizing summer for most people in spirituality is still something they are unaware of. And I hope today that you will get inspired to use the summer differently and to then trigger more expansion of consciousness, more healing, and more growth. Because that is the great potential. You can all maximize the potential in your life, and you can use the summer in a way as a benchmark for how much you've been able to move, how much you've been able to transform from last year. So if you learn how to work with summer, you will move faster and you will notice.
So we got a lot of questions tonight online. We have a question about recently we've had solar storms and northern lights coming way down. How do solar storms affect us physically, biologically, and spiritually?
Now, when I look at what's happening, because, you know, we are focusing on the spiritual process here, right? And solar storms represent when things are moving about a bit. Think of chaos in your own life. When things happen, it often shakes the tree a bit and shake you up in such a way that you may be more open for change. So when you have heightened solar activity, it means that when we mirror ourselves in that energy and vibration, it means that things move. It creates this chaos where things are affected more, meaning that things are less solid. It's like a divine intervention, right? Where more flow is projected into your life and things start to move about. And it's also utilizing the times where there's heightened solar activity to then shake things up in your life and then not be surprised when there are abrupt changes and manifestations. Because this is how that vibration and information will be translated into the human kind of space of matter and manifestation. When you look at all other types of light phenomena, it's just still different variations of our interaction with light. But again, understand that your every cell, they're all built on their relationship to light, and they're able to absorb light directly. They're able to absorb information. Because basically, sun is information. It represents that source. And it also represents the source within. Remember, you are supposed to be the sun in your own life. You're supposed to be God, the creator in your own life. So when we look at the relationship to winter, right, and that whole cycle, and as we have bigger cycles, I've talked about the potential of dark night of soul, which is a form of winter, right? It means that first we're exposed to the light, and then we get new ideas, we reinvent and we learn, but we are basking in a space where we feel uplifted or where we experience that things work. And then we gradually move into darkness to see, what have I learned? How strong is my inner light? Because in the darkness you have to guide yourself by the light of your own heart and through your own skills and what you have learned. And that is the purpose of darkness. It's very productive to show us it's up to you, so you can show yourself what you have learned, so you can navigate and try to use your tools and skills and demonstrate, well, I have changed, I've learned a new trick or two. And life will then provide the spaces and the opportunities for you to test out your new skills. That's what darkness is. So, but that also means that things solidify because they incarnate, right? When you've learned something spiritually, it will have to incarnate and move into matter so it becomes concrete. And then you do it. It becomes something you relate to in a very concrete way. They turn into manifestations, they turn into tools, right? That's the darkness. And then you play around with it, because now life will arrange situations where you have to use those exact skills and tools. So you may practice, right? So it has to be solid, less light. So then the cycle goes back. When you've learned, and then well, this is my life now, right? Now this is what it is. This is truth. I've got it. I understand now. Then you gravitate towards the sun, and the sun's, well, time to reinvent. Time to let go. Time to be flexible. Time, And then we're helped also through our hormones and all of that to become more flexible, to become more happy, to become less attached, so we can move, and in the process then, things will fall, right? And if we move far enough, we may enter new spaces, discover new things, try new things, and then they will turn into habits. And, the cycle just keeps going. So in the summer, try new things. Try more new things than you normally do. This is, what people, for instance, do on vacation. But they do it in a space that is kind of foreign often when we travel, so we don't kind of bring it home, right? It's just something fun. But think of your life space and you pushing yourself to try new things. Go past your boundaries and say, well, I've decided I would never do that. Time to try it. You should always be curious. What is beyond my limitation? What's beyond my boundary? What's beyond, I'm saying, like, this is where I put my fence. Why? There's always more. So be curious and just push yourself. Try new things. Be open. And then in the fall, try to see what out of all of these things can I include in my platform, in my kind of living space, in my habits. Because unless it's a habit, it doesn't exist. All right? So we need to go from trying and being open and just going with the flow to saying, oh, right, I can use that. I can include this. But that takes repetition. So it's first pushing your boundaries, trying new things. Okay? And if you see, well, this may be beneficial, repeat it. And you need to repeat it enough times so it becomes a habit. Right? Only then. Right? Back to, you need 2 steps, not 1. So in all directions where you're trying new things, do it thoroughly. Go back, do it again, repeat. So you feel, well, okay, I guess this is who we are now. You need to, you need to go past the boundary of your neighborhood and walk away from your family of identity. So you feel, oh, I guess I'm on my own now. Well, then let's see what's here. Do this in summer, always, because life will give you these opportunities. And as I said, we can use the potential of summer two ways. We can fall asleep and then self-sabotage because we're not utilizing the potential. Or we can wake up and we can use the hormones to get extra strength, to get extra will, to push ourselves, to be more creative, right? To go beyond our boundaries, to turn ourselves on, so we're there, we're present, and we're trying to grow and heal. Look at our past, look at our patterns, look at our wounds. Is it like, okay, I want to heal. And then be in the sun. Meditate in the sun and understand that the presence of the sun is deep, deep in your cells. It's God biologically, and you can use that because your cells feel, I'm in the presence of God, and you can say, yes, we are. And then you can use that, right? And that's the wonderful thing about the sun. It's concrete. It's there. You can feel it physically, which means when you connect that to spiritual work, your body will be in on it. And think of how many shocks and traumas and memories are in your cells, right? Everything we go through will create an imprint. Your cells have memory. The sun is extremely powerful as a tool to let go of any trauma programs in your cells. But you have to let go. You have to meditate on it. So instead of relaxing in the sun, of course you're allowed to do that too, but try to meditate in the sun. Try to communicate with the sun. Try to allow your kind of closeness to the sun. Visualize or perceptualize that you're close to the sun, that you can see it, that you can see the process. And let that process be mirrored in you. It's such a wonderful potential, and it's always been there. It's just that our current culture has forgotten all about it. We have to go back to the days of Egypt. That was the last kind of time in history where it was really about the sun, and then we first made it about people because the kings or rulers in Egypt made it about themselves. Not that they represented God. They became God. And then that turned into Jesus and whatnot. So that's where we broke off. But in our spiritual work, we can also just say, yeah, it's part of the history. It's part of what we can utilize. We can have fun with it. Because it's not like we're to relate to the sun as God, but we can understand that ourselves do. And that the presence of it, how it affects us, and how it affects our biology, our energy, our consciousness, our chakras, everything, we can use that to trigger more spiritual growth. And it's back to what I often say, what humans always try to do is to try to grow vegetables in the winter time, and then they whine and then about, nature is not supporting me, why am I being punished? It's that. Do your most important growth work in the summer when the sun will pull you towards it, right? And then accept that in the winter things will solidify more, and then you can study that, right? If we learn to make use of the seasons, we can find that every time of year can be extremely productive. And instead of banging our heads against the wall, we can understand what type of spiritual work to do when. We have more questions?
Yes, we've got a question in the audience.
This is really interesting. Thank you. I've never really thought about it as a tool we could use. From a perspective of spiritual potential, if I live near the equator, because of the wobble of the earth, I'm pretty much the same distance from the sun at all times, whereas the farther north or south you go, obviously it becomes more. Why? I'm also really curious, why you and I, where we both chose to incarnate in this part of the world here, in Norway, for example, where there's a huge resistance to change here. It's a cold winter. There's a lot of...
Exactly, and that's
just,
why.
How does that affect our potential for growth, depending
Yes,
on where we are?
it's so fun because when you're closer to equator you go, the less attached people are to matter. And the further north you go, the more it is about manifestation and things. So you have to go basically to the level of Europe before people begin to be productive for real, right? Because not only is it the kind of lack of sun, but also from a practical perspective, humans developed more of the intellectual capacity at that level, that climate, because you have to plan. Closer to equator where things grow all the time, you don't have to learn how to grow anything. You don't have to plan because every day is the same. When you go further north, you have seasons, you have varieties. You have to start to plan. And you have, for instance, have to figure out when to pick, plants you can eat and store them, which means you have to figure out how to do that. You have to learn how to grow things because it's not there all year round. So you learn to relate to the seasons. And that takes a strategic thinking. It takes planning. It takes abstract thinking and relating to something that hasn't happened, right? So that's why over time, that kind of belt became the most productive, right? When developed intellectually, when developed sciences and arts and all of that, because of that balance between, close to the sun and then the cold and the seasons triggered intelligence. So we incarnate where we do based on what we're studying, right? For instance, when you're closer to equator, you can see that all over the world, it's more difficult to have permanence in matter. Everything's kind of halfway, and it's difficult to establish kind of civilization for real, right? Because you can have, people relate more to who we are as people than our things, right? And for instance, if you go to Africa and the middle of Africa, you will see that the most important capital you have is who you are. Right? One can say that is more intelligent because we externalize everything to prove who we are. When you take that away, and that is not as important, it's who you are, your energy, and people can see it. That becomes hard cash. So you can see that the closer you get to equator. Traditionally, who you are becomes more important. How you carry yourself, your insight, your wisdom, your journey. When we have things, we can just fake it. Because, look at me, I've got things. I'm more important. It's that we externalize ourselves more. Just different approaches, and we incarnate based on what we want to study. It may be interesting, for instance, for someone who's then incarnated closer to equator, right? And say, okay, I am me, blah, blah. Well, now turn that into matter, right? It's just interesting. We incarnate into all sorts of settings and planets and dimensions and life forms, finding every possible angle because it's interesting. It's how we get to know ourselves. So there's no right or wrong ways, simply that we incarnate exactly where we want to be so we can study our own relationship to life. But it's quite natural, as I say, when you live closer to the equator, you're more in that melting pot where matter will dissolve faster, where it's more about the essence, right? And here we get more of that cycle. And that's just fun. Right? But often you will find that people who are dedicated to spiritual work closer to equator, often you will see that they have an enormous lived dedication. often we can feel they're kind of walking powerhouses because it's lived, it's practiced. It's not through paraphernalia and robes and hats. It's just that, right? And it's wonderful. So the spiritual work becomes more of the personal transformation and that being visible. And that's absolutely wonderful. So it's also fun to see how that kind of closeness to the sun the entire time also will kind of dictate how we relate to spirituality.
Online, we have a question of how does the moon sort of play into the influence of the sun during the summertime or other seasons?
Oh, well, the moon is a whole different thing. If you want to, we can have an episode on the moon because, you know, in the world of astrology and all of that, the moon has also its job. It will mirror specific things. It's more associated with, you know, both the subconscious mind, because remember, the light is mirrored from the sun. So it's all how you get close to all your mirrors in life, how you get close to everything that is not in your face, but maybe more hidden, shown in more subtle ways. So it's all of that. But today, we're focusing on the sun, and for all of you to, in a way, also reinvent your relationship to the sun and also see it as a spiritual tool. But the moon is definitely there. So we can have an episode on that if you all want to at some point.
Okay, we also have a question about red light therapy as a way to either supplement the sun even during the summer or especially during the winter. Is that an important thing to do?
Red light therapy is excellent. I used it myself because it can stimulate the cells for both anti-aging, it's anti-inflammatory. It's documented, it has a lot of benefits. But it's not the same as the sun though, because we're talking about a huge body of exploding gas. And you cannot emulate that in a red light panel, but those panels are excellent. So by all means, I think most people would benefit from red light therapy, but it's not something that can replace the sun as a celestial body that affects us and has been affecting humans since they were bacterial.
Okay, one more question online before we go to the audience again. This one's interesting. Is the sun a spiritual being? And if it is a spiritual being, can it be quantified in terms of a level or a dimension of some sort?
Now, the simple question is this. Everything is live. I know for the human brain, humans have classified themselves as alive, although we may question that. But for humans, the more they look like humans, the more alive they are. So if you have an animal with a face, they're close to humans and more alive. The moment they do not look like humans, when they don't have a face, they're obviously less alive and less important. And if they're less animate, it means they can't move properly well, then they're even less alive. And so it's all of that until you have, you know, stone. Everything is alive. When you understand that the only purpose of all of this is for consciousness and what we are spiritually to explore and express and learn about ourselves, it means that every constellation of matter carries consciousness. And so that means that your chair carries consciousness. It doesn't mean that it's a person. It means that every constellation of atoms and particles will carry consciousness in some form. So all levels of evolution are always present. And of course, when you look at the sun, like stars, planets, they all carry consciousness. And they all carry specific vibration. And this also with, we're also here working with astrology, and we're also we're actually doing that. We're introducing a lot of hidden knowledge that has been lost. Also about the consciousness part of celestial bodies, and more of the information and vibration that it represents. Because when you look at space, I've explained this before, but part of how physics work. If you think of information comes first, consciousness comes first, what that vibrates will dictate what dimension, what type of space, where in that space, what type of manifestation, what type of constellation, like all of that. And that means that each planet and star, they also represent that. They represent coordinates in the universe, meaning that that is something specific, representing something specific. Our solar system represents something specific compared to other solar systems. This galaxy represents something else than other galaxies. So it's understanding that when we incarnate somewhere, it's because that place correlates completely with where we are in our own spiritual evolution, down to the body you're in, the time you chose to incarnate, the culture, like everything, your DNA, everything represents your exact point of growth, your exact point of evolution. And that's what makes it fun. So yes, one can also study kind of the other way and look at all forms of manifestation and understanding like what they mean and why. And when you also relate to mirroring, because that's a big part of spiritual work, is understanding that everything we experience will be an echo of our own mind, our own karma, our own consciousness. So when something happens, it's something in us being externalized so we can see it and relate to it and work on it so we can heal and grow. And that means also relating to planets and stars and, furniture and people and trees and everything in the same way. And then understand it carries significance in the way it may mirror something in our own process. So there is no difference between, I would say, like spiritual astrology and how you may be mirrored through another person, right? How sometimes a person will say something and it just hits you because it's the externalization of your own thought or your own subconscious process. It's the same thing, and it never stops. The outer world is simply that. It's an enormous space that may create echoes and mirrors for you. So, and then we have collective ones, for instance, like the sun. We're all experiencing it, which means it's also a collective process. For instance, when you're being mirrored in a person, it may only affect you. But since we're all on this planet together, all life forms, and we relate to the sun, it means also that it's the same type of karma, it's the same type of process, also the same type of potential. And then we can learn to utilize that individually and together. And learning to understand more about the space we incarnate into is part of spiritual awakening, and it makes life so much more interesting than thinking that things are just happening, I guess I just have to live here until I die. To understand that everything is math. Everything is precise. And everything is information. There is not a single thing in your life that does not carry spiritual significance in detail and with precision. But our culture is so blind and deaf. Humans definitely have information blindness. They can't see the simplest thing about how existence is one. Humans are not able to see love. They're not able to see connectedness. They cannot see these waves of flow. They cannot see information. They can only see things. They can only see what the light is reflected off of. Back to how humans relate to light. Everything you see is based on the light originally from the sun in that spectrum being reflected off of something. So you determine something outside of you based on how the sun hits you from that object. We're not able in this life form to understand what something is on vibration and information alone. Right? So even when it comes to how we relate to the world around us, that is all sunlight too. Right? And really try to take in that the sun is the premise of absolutely everything in your body and your brain and how you operate in the world. Because once you get it, working with the sun as a presence and learning about these seasons and trying to optimize how you use summer can be so beneficial and so interesting. And once you get the hang of kind of working with it, it's like you can't understand how you didn't understand this before. Anyone else?
Okay, we've got a question in the audience.
Yeah, so if I was going to utilize this information and say like in the beginning of summer, I'm planning on how to manifest my ambitions and working on that for a small period of time. And then if I'm not able to create those changes at that moment, is it wise to just do, like you said, learn something totally different, go somewhere totally different and do different things for a period of time? Will that also help?
Yes, because pushing boundaries are often about pushing boundaries. It's not necessarily where you push it. I often refer to the Truman Show as that is human life. And if you think of it, it doesn't matter which wall you hit. As long as you go close up to a wall and, oh, this is cardboard, right? It doesn't matter which wall, right? So once you're able to push past a boundary, especially if it's significant, it will be connected to other forms of boundaries and the stories you've made up about why the boundary is there. And that's the beauty of it. It doesn't matter which wall. They're all connected. But it has to be significant, right? And it has to be far enough. Because just like in the Truman Show, it was not enough just to discover it. He had to go out, right? Also out of the building, like to discover what it is. Because otherwise, if you don't know anything more and you put, okay, this is weird, and then nothing. You have to go past it. So yes, seeing even holiday as a spiritual practice of doing exactly that. New places, new people, new things, and just like be a better version of yourself. Because, often what people do, which is not very productive, because during the winter we feel so blocked and we're holding things back and this or that. And see, like most relationships, when it comes to marriages, it's the summer that kills them. Because during the winter, there's so many expectations and, we work so hard and blah, blah, and now we just want vacation. And then we want everything that didn't happen to happen. We want compensation for our every need. So what we do is that we say, I am ready to be loved now. I am ready to have all my needs met. And we expect other people to do that, of course. And they expect the same. And then you go on vacation. It's a disaster. But when you look at your own relationships, and many of you have experienced this, right? Family vacation is hell for this reason. Everyone wants this vacation so much for themselves. So what we do is we want to, we experience the suffering of our own limitations. And then we just want our suffering to be compensated. So, again, we want to be loved. We want our needs to be met. We're doing it all wrong. The only way to get past this is to dissolve the need, is to dissolve the story. And that's what we need to do in summer. So, instead of, because if you go into summer and say, I really want to be loved, and then you will be disappointed. What you can do is to love more. And that is the technique. If you love more, you will never be disappointed. If you give more, you will never be disappointed. If you support others more, you will never be disappointed. Right? If you nurture, if you lift, if you're generous, you will never be disappointed. So we need to look at, why do I feel this way in winter and spring? Because those are the patterns we need to let go of. And then we need to practice being the person we want to become, instead of trying to compensate for the person we don't want to be. Right? And in essence, it's that simple. But because the human brain is what it is, we just want to sit down and relax, and we want other people to give because I deserve it now. It never works. It creates more suffering that you then take with you into the fall, and it will crystallize even more. Right? So in our culture, we're doing the opposite of what we need to do. So look at yourself. Look at everything you want to change in life. Right? Look at who you want to be instead. And practice. And instead of wanting something to be given to you, recognize, well, this is an energy. The only way to inject it into your life is by doing it yourself. So again, love more. And when people say, I wish I had someone to love, are you fucking kidding me? There's not a single being in the world that doesn't need more love. Right? But it's basically that we want a recognition for our love, so that we just want to be loved. And it's that. No. As someone who's waking up spiritually, you need to do better. And it's recognizing that is the road to disaster. Whatever you feel you want in your life, you will have to vibrate it. And you vibrate it when you give it. So be, everything you want in your life. Work on being that version of yourself. But then you also need to concretely, how do I become this person? How do I practice? Right? And it is easier because in the summer we're more flexible, we're more open, this or that. And for instance, because of hormones, and also because we're closer to the pre-manifested state of the sun, our sexual energy is normally higher. That is your creative energy. Right? So how you activate it also is by having more sex. Because that can also help you channel that energy. Because if you want to manifest, if you want to create, that energy has to be flowing. And sex is also practicing the state of sexual energy. Because you are the creator, right? You are the sun. And your sexual flow, sexual energy is the closest to the sun as you can possibly come. Right? So you need to practice that too. And then see, when you are being more sexual and when you allow for more of that sexual flow, you become more creative. It's easier to grow, to change, to do other things. Right? As all of you have experienced, when you, for instance, if you're in love and if you have a lot of sex, you're less attached to your habits. Anything goes. As long as I'm happy, as long, that. Because you are in a co-creative space in yourself, in a co-creative energy. So you can just create new things. It doesn't matter. Right? So try to ignite that flow too. It is also part of being closer to the sun. And then what I think is important is trying to let the sun last, trying to let the summer last. And you do that by seeing summer as a spiritual practice, going on holidays as a spiritual practice. Again, try new things. Push your boundaries. Don't repeat habits. Do the opposite. Love more. Manifest new things. Include new things. Everything you said, that's not me. Well, that's the whole point. Do it. Don't be you. Be someone else, which is better. And recognize that you're not the summary of your past experiences. You are the summary of the potentials you have not released yet. Understand that so far, this is your evolution. And the rest of it is a light year. Your definitions of you and your reality is nothing. You will experience everything. You will figure everything out. You will go everywhere. You will touch everything. You will know everything. You will become everything. So what you know so far, how you define yourself, is nothing. So don't let that stop you. Understand that whoever you think you are, it's not that. You're far better. Life is far better. Everything is far better than you think. So you have to move past your fantasies about limitations, your fantasies about how you are limited, your blockages, all that, because it's just stories. But every time you allow yourself to move closer to the sun and to interact with that as a presence, you will melt a little. You will reinvent a little. You will transform. You will open yourself up, and it will affect you. And then you can practice and repeat and bring those habits into the fall. And you can decide to continue to meditate on the sun and try to let that help you still let go of old stuff and establish new things. And at some point, it will solidify, and hopefully you will find yourself on a new level. Every year should be a spiral. It should not be a cycle. Every year should be on a higher level. But then you have to reinvent. You have to use the summer. And I can promise you, when you learn to work with the sun this way, and you work with the year, and you understand that, all right, in the winter, we're studying ourselves. We're studying what we have learned, how to practice, what to keep, what to throw away. And in the springtime, you start the cleaning process, right? Then we start cleaning and purifying and all of that. So we know what we need to get rid of. We're ready to push our boundaries. We're ready to heal. We're ready to go into the reinvention. This is why detox in the spring is important. Why we need to clean our houses in the spring, right? We all know this. It's in our DNA. But use the seasons. It's part of the journey to learn to work with nature. It doesn't mean that we go back to being pagan. It's just understanding that we live in a space where everything is communicating, everything is pulsating, everything is there for you to become more productive spiritually. And you can be. And this is the most wonderful part of the year, to truly transform, to truly go beyond everything, and to find that new level of evolution in you. And then live that person, love that person, and just get it out. Experiment and do things that are far away from your established identity. Right? Just whatever. It doesn't matter which wall you hit, as long as you hit a wall. As long as you go past that wall, it will have effect on the rest of your walls. Just don't care too much about your boundaries. Don't care too much about your limitations, your blockages, because they mean nothing. You are the sun, ultimately, because that is spiritually what you will become. You will become this enormous melting pot of everything with no attachment, where you will be able to reinvent yourself, always include whatever is in life, and you will keep going. So you will manifest and demanifest, going to that place and become that individual. Then you change. You don't need identity. You don't need to hold on to anything. Life is incredibly abundant. And every moment is a birth. And this is also what the sun is showing. Every moment is new. And over time, you will learn to become that powerful and that free. So let the sun attract you. Let the sun heal you. Let the sun melt away everything you don't need, and for you to move into your higher potential with joy and with fun and with sex and with exploration and with togetherness, and just let yourself become everything you can possibly be, because you fucking deserve it. Have a nice summer.
Thank you, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us, both online and here at IKYA Center. Again, this has been IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for spiritual advice in your everyday life. This was our last episode before the summer holidays, so follow us along here this summer. We'll be posting content regularly, and then you can find out more about IKYA Live after the summer. And we do wish you an absolutely beautiful summer until we meet again. Thank you for joining us.